Hi guys, how are you? Thank you for joining us today. We are super excited to have Samantha and Ozzy and Luis part of this conversation. My name is Christina Pinzone, and I'm the owner of Stateside Affairs. I'm also a board member with the Statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Today, as I mentioned, we have our very own chairman, Luis Egalos. We have Samantha Parker, who's the director of appointments for the state of New Jersey. And we have Ozzy Gromada Mesa, Vice President of Member and Talent Services for the Latino Corporate Directors Association. Thanks, guys. How are all of you?
Great.
Pretty good. Thank you.
Well,
Thanks for having us.
Yes, so thankful to be here.
Thanks, Sam. No, we're excited to get this conversation going and share some valuable information with the Latino community. I know, Sam, I want to really thank you for taking the time to do this. We had this conversation a few weeks ago, and the minute I expressed our interest to have you discuss what the process is to become a board member with some of the board and commissions, you were right on top of it, and you said, yes, when. So thank you for doing that.
Of course.
But I guess right before we get into like the questions and answers, I think Luis is going to do us the honor of formally introducing Sam and just giving a little background from where she comes.
Yeah, that's a big responsibility. But Samantha Parker is an organizational and development and political professional with extensive experience in strategic planning, leadership management, civic engagement, and collaborative partnership building. Sam is currently the Director of Appointments for the Governor Phil Murphy. Before joining the administration in March 2021, Sam served as the Development and Political Affairs for the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide. Sam has also Congressman Frank Pallone, Deputy Campaign Director in 2013, and Deputy Field Director for the New Jersey State Democratic Committee Victory Campaign in 2012. Before her return to her home state in 2012, she works for organizations such as the National LGBTQ Task Force, Human Rights, Equality Maine, and Equality North Carolina on LGBT plus issue campaigns and all over the country. Wow, this is a bigger responsibility.
I need to put that down.
It's okay.
than being the chairman of the Statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. But I just want to share that I'm part of I joined the Commission of Secure. I forgot the title, but it's with the administration, and took me 7 years to get there. Mm-hmm. From the inception to Secure Choice is the name of the commission. Yep. And some people expect that this happened overnight, and it's not the case. But nope. I just want to share that as a part of my journey. Thank you very much for joining us today.
I appreciate that you're not super mad that it took you 7 years to get there. Mm-hmm. I do think that there is this misconception very often that as soon as your name is submit, we can make this all happen very, very quickly. Sometimes it does happen quickly, depending on the type of board. Christina, I think that you've got a really amazing announcement that you'd like to make.
Yes. So I actually can attest to the process, and I'm very honored that I was just recently appointed to the Center for Hispanic Policy Research and Development. So thank you, Samantha, and thank you for everyone who allowed that to happen. I'm really happy to be giving back to my community through this role.
And I think that both of you now have given great examples of sometimes it takes a lengthy period of time, like 7 years. And I think we were able to work on your appointment in a month, 2 months. So it does really depend. It depends on the types of commission. Some of our boards are advice and consent. That means they have to go through the advice and consent of the Senate. Some of our boards are direct. With a direct appointment, we're able to move those a little bit more easily. They don't go super, super fast, but a little bit more easily. But let me just run through the process very quickly. I think everything starts with a resume. Also, I like to, so I have a little bit of a background as a teacher. I was actually growing up, I really thought I was going to be a high school English teacher. And then I was about 21 years old, about to graduate, getting ready to figure it out. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't tell 15-year-olds I know more than they do. Right. So, and politics and building community and being an organizer was always my passion. And I never really thought of that as being a career. And yet here I am. Right. So I shifted more that route, but I've always been a teacher at heart. I've always given back to my communities. I was actually an adjunct professor of political science at Brookdale Community College. So I love to think of this as like a very teachable experience, right? Where some people like to stop us and say, well, what if you don't know how to put together a resume? This is a great opportunity to use services that are available to you at your local level, county level, et cetera, to help you work on writing a resume. But we also take bios. We really just need your information of pretty much what you've done, a home address and email address, et cetera. So a bio resume is where the process begins. Then I'll send that out to someone on my team. They'll get in touch with you and they'll send you a questionnaire. This is a questionnaire that you must fill out and return to us. It's kind of like getting to know you. It lets us get to know you better and what your interests are. I always like to say, if you're unsure of what board or commission that you think that you'd be best on, give me your top 5. Because that helps me. Obviously, you know yourself better than I know you. So it gives me a place to kind of, okay, this is what their interests are and move through there. So that's the first part. The second thing is we do a vetting process. Actually, I'm going to back up. There are a couple of questions about finances on the questionnaire. And I really feel like this is, especially when I'm talking with communities of color, I want to give space to the fact that sometimes when we're talking about our finances, it's a very uncomfortable conversation because a lot of people feel judged or feel that ancestral trauma around finances, right? Or shamed. So I want to be very clear that there is nothing that can preclude you from being appointed unless you've embezzled millions of dollars, right? That's obviously going to be something that's going to be problematic. But really, it's just we want to get to know you. We obviously understand small business owners live on a different tax schedule, right? Sometimes they're working through other things. It's not going to be used negatively against you. We ask the questions just so we have an idea of the context of who you are as a whole person. So I do think that's really important. The other important part is we have a new self-identification section at the end where you get to choose. It's a choose your own adventure. If there's stuff you want to share and other stuff you don't want to share, you're not forced to share anything. But this allows us to track our equity as we're moving forward in these appointments. So that's the questionnaire. Then you'll return it to us. Then it's a department-wide vetting process. I like to point out here, obviously, you're not going to agree on every policy and procedure that this governor moves forward with or this administration move forward with, and that's okay. Depending on who you're working with or what organizations you're a part of, it's understandable that you would voice potentially opposing opinions. However, there's a difference between voicing opposing positions respectfully and being disrespectful about it. You can't obviously be tremendously publicly rude or quoted saying inappropriate things or calling the governor some curse words, which we've had in the past, and expect to be put on a board or commission, right? I think that's just like general respect. So that's something there. So then we do the vetting process. As long as everything comes back great, then we can move forward with the appointment. What I typically do is I run it up the chain with our senior staff and then the governor himself. He and I run through these appointments pretty regularly. And then if it's advice and consent, same thing, same process, run it through the chain. The only difference is that once we make the decision that we're going to nominate, we have to wait for a quorum. So the Senate has to be in session They are currently not in session. They won't be back. They're on budget break, so they won't be back until the beginning of May. So I haven't been able to make any advice and consent nominations. But when we talk about timelines, right, the breaks add to the timelines. And then once we nominate, it's a whole different process because, again, it's at the advice and consent of your senator. I like to say this is a great time for civic engagement. If you don't know who your current senators, your county senators, your state senators are, get to know them, mainly because this is also a really great opportunity for them to know who their constituents are, what they're passionate about, what they're working towards. And very often, state senators don't have a huge staff. So if they're looking for advice on certain issues, you might just be the best person for them to reach out to, and they don't know until they meet you. So I always say, reach out to your state senators, get to know them. That way, if you're in a position where we're going to nominate you, you're going to have to ask for that senator's courtesy, almost kind of like a blessing on the moving the nomination forward so that you can be voted in the Senate Judiciary Committee and then move on to a full confirmation vote. So that's the process. I kind of condensed it very quickly. But I know that there are going to be questions and stuff like that. So I just wanted to run through the process. The advice and consent does take a lot of time. Everything takes a lot of time. We really make sure to vet the best qualified candidates. And when I say best qualified, I really want to be clear here. What I'm looking for is diverse candidates. That isn't just about race and ethnicity or gender, right? We're talking about sexual orientation. We're talking about gender identity, but we're also talking about geographic location in the state. I can't have a board that's all Bergen-based or Atlantic-based or Hudson-based, right? We need to make sure that we have a really great representation of all aspects of our community, whether that be you are a community college person, right? If you're in community college and you're studying political science, we have boards. If you're in the middle of your career, if you're at the end of your career, if you are, wherever you are, we have positions, and we definitely want to make sure that our community voices are recognized. If you haven't graduated from high school, that's okay. If you haven't graduated from college, that's okay. We need different, diverse voices here, and everybody's lived experience adds to that.
Perfect. No, I think
Can
that's
I?
really... Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes,
Luis.
I just want to mention something. Based on my experience, networking is really important because you need to meet a lot of people. When I mentioned that took me 7 years, is that commission didn't exist until last year, right? Actually, yes. Yep. And just became, now, when you are part of the process, when you propose something and you get through the entire process, you understand why everything takes so long. But I will say that the other thing that we need to consider is that the state has more agencies than we can imagine, and we also, when we are asking for diversity, we also need to be diverse. Sometimes they are telling us that it's an opportunity in the agriculture commission, or in places that we don't know, and sometimes we are closed. We don't want to listen, and it's opportunities there that we can take advantage of if we are open to, right? I think that those are the two things that I learned in the past 10 years that make the difference.
And I also think that joining a board is another way to network, right? Because you're going to be meeting like-minded individuals who might not be able to assist you or help you now, but further down the line in your career, they might become some of your biggest assets. And not only that, but moving forward, if you are on a board, there's always ways to move to different boards after you get a couple under your belt and move to more prestigious boards as well.
And also teach you the opportunity to have difficult conversations, because not everybody thinks like you and not everybody agree with what you say. But having that opportunity, that learn and practice, I think that make a difference for us in our community.
And Sam, so can you tell us about, just so people get an idea, if this isn't their world, how many boards, commissions, authorities, a rough estimate, because I know there's a lot.
Over 1,100.
Okay, so over 1,100.
Over 1,100. I was recently at a conference for the National Governors Association. So there are 34 other states in the room, and there was an audible gasp when I said how many boards and commissions that we have, but it's over 1,100.
Okay, so
we are doing a deep dive into our system to see who's active, who's inactive. So hopefully we're going to pare this down. so that it's not super overreach or that we're underutilizing or overutilizing certain resources. We are doing a deep dive into that currently, so that number might change, but as of right now, it's 1,100.
And we have the website where you list all the commission and boards that I know that on our back end. There you go.
There, yes.
People can go to. How can they find out what boards, and can they find out what boards have openings?
Yes.
And then maybe Ozzy, then afterwards you can like share some tips, giving like your position too, how people can prepare to join these boards as well.
Yeah, so real quick, this is our website. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not the most up to date. I can tell you this because we are currently working on revamping our current data management system, just something that works a little bit more functional. We inherited it from a previous administration, and that is not a knock on any administration. This is how software works sometimes, but it's a little clunky. We'd like to get it to not be so clunky and be a little bit more user-friendly, especially for the end user, right? So this is to the best of our ability. Inaccurate information in is inaccurate information out. So what I always recommend is always look for a vacancy. If you don't see one though, don't let your hopes down. It is possible to still serve. We have people that are serving in holdover capacity that might be looking to make a change. So I always say, regardless if there's a quote unquote vacancy or not, let us know that you're interested. And hopefully, I'm really hoping that we're going to get this software soon. I've been hoping for the last couple of months. Things work slowly in government. I don't know if anyone's heard that before. But yes, so hopefully we're going to make this a little bit easier of a system moving forward.
Ozzy, welcome to the conversation. Feel free to jump in at any time.
It is, Luis and Sam, this is always a great conversation. And at the Latino Corporate Directors Association, where I'm the Vice President of Member and Talent Services, I have conversations every single day regarding, what does it take to be a board member, what qualities really resonate for those interested in board service, and happy to provide my perspective. But Sam, for this conversation, what are specific qualities that do make someone a good board member for the roles that you're trying to fill?
Are they breathing? No, I'm kidding. No, I think one of the things is there's a hard nut to crack here, which is, I think, for so many different communities. And this is kind of why, Christina, when you said, do you want to come and speak to us? I'm like, yes, because the one thing I love about working for this administration, when I first started, I told Governor Murphy, when we were talking about this position, I said, listen, if we're going to be about it, we need to be about it. Right. And I'm pretty much known for saying that all the time. And this relates to what does a good board member look like? I think that these are conversations that too often members of communities of color are excused from, or what's the word I'm looking for? Right. It's the trying to figure out your place. Right. Mm-hmm. So I always say, if you are somebody who is interested in giving back to your community, if you have a passion in something, and you've got time to commit, that is how you are a good board member, right? Because part of this is, it's one thing to have passion, but if you don't have time, that's not going to be a good fit. So it's really got to be all those three things. You have to be a New Jersey resident, right? So we have had, I believe we have some dreamers that are currently serving on our boards and commissions. You have to have the time to dedicate. One thing that we're really working through, as I know a lot of other businesses and organizations are, is if we're going to keep allowing our committees to meet regularly on Zoom. Now, it is I am advocating for yes. I think we get higher caliber individuals. It's easier to give your time when you're doing it from your own home and you don't have to travel somewhere. And it's also about making access to these boards a lot easier. And I think that does that, especially when we're talking about communities of color. So we want to make this more accessible. So I think the passion and the time, that's going to be and it's, I think, partially, if we're really going to get into like a vulnerable space, which I always think is really important, it's getting over that inferiority syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. Of the consistently being told, like, these conversations aren't for you. No, these conversations are for you. And I think it's reminding whomever is thinking of joining, right, that if you have, everything is valid, right? Your experiences are valid. You don't need to have a college education. We really want to make sure that we are inclusive of all the voices that are the incredible voices that we have from the state of New Jersey. So I think that's, if we're going to go a little deep, those are all the things I would say it makes a good board member, because I think very often it's the inferiority of feeling like you don't belong somewhere that really stops somebody from engaging. So I like to be as friendly and approachable as possible. When people ask me to do things, I'm always going to say yes, because I want folks to know that we really, as long as they're up for the task of getting on the board, which could take some time, we want them there.
Sam, I 100% agree. I think there's some very relatable qualities when it comes to corporate board service where we specifically focus on, and dedicated and committed is the number one, quality. I think people don't understand the level of time and dedication that's needed to just manage these roles and the role that they have. And the other big one is being an insatiable learner, really just wanting
curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity, and just wanting to really understand the ins and outs of the role, the mission, the values. That is really important, especially now where board service has been front and center from government perspective and also corporate perspective. So everyone wants to be on a board.
Mm-hmm.
We have to stop for a second and say, okay, is this really aligned to where I'm at in my career, and as well aligns to my values, and that I can bring some knowledge or benefit to the organization that's just another person. So I think there's a lot of relatable aspects when it comes to corporate board service.
And I think it's also really important to come as you are, right? I think one thing in this role that I've always made sure to do is, you can't see them today, but like, I'm tattooed, right? I have a septum piercing. All of this is visible, and I'm in the position that I'm in, right? And I think that I want to communicate to other individuals who think that because they're tattooed or they're pierced, that they're less than, or they're not invited to be in these spaces, right? No, we really want to make sure, again, if we're going to be about it, we're going to be about it. So it's about that. I was doing another webinar a couple of days ago, and someone said, well, I'm trans. What boards or commissions should I be thinking about? And I said, all of them, right? All of them. Because, and I think that this is really relevant for, especially when we're talking about the Hispanic community, right? Is, well, what board should we be? No, all of them, right? You shouldn't be limited to just one. We're not trying to check off a box, right? We really want to make sure that the issues that affect our state affect everybody, regardless of what their race and ethnicity are, what their gender identity is, what their orientation is. They have, just because, I mean, I'm queer, right? I identify to LGBT. So, but guess what? Economy, right? Economic decisions are really important to me and my family. We need to have voices there. We need to have voices on school boards. We need to have voices on, all across the board. It isn't just limited because of one aspect of how I identify. And I really want to stress that to the folks who are watching today.
You really hit on something important that I want to just emphasize, is that you said that, and I didn't know this, that you have dreamers that are part of this board. And so I think that being, the fastest growing minority organization or group, in the state of New Jersey and across the United States, dreamers is a big part of us, and we want to make sure that we elevate them as well. And a lot of times that they're afraid to share their information or serve on these boards, they don't even know that that's even a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I already know a few that I would totally recommend. And I think
I've even tried. There was somebody who wanted to apply, but they didn't speak English, wasn't their first language. And I was like, let me see if I can get a translator, right? And I don't know that we could. I was still working on it. But again, like, we really are doing what we can to make this inclusive, right? Because at the bottom, the end of the day, again, these are voices that matters. The whole point of public members is to bring an aspect that isn't directly involved. For instance, like on the board of nursing, there are public members. And they want specific people that aren't involved in the medical field. Why? Because it's your experiences that kind of check and balance the nurses that are on the board, right? That's the purpose of a public member. So why wouldn't a dreamer be a great example of what a public member who has lived a very different life than myself, they would be an incredible public member, in my opinion.
I want to share something. It's often Carlos and I, we get those calls that people ask, how'd you get to that board if you didn't graduate from an MBA or from Ivy school? And when we share our journeys and when we explain to them how time we commit and things that we need to do just to get to that position, people don't understand. They think that it's just like filling up a short application. I asked for help to different people to help me to fill it up that form because I was scared. It was like 10 pages, was a lot of information. And the other thing that happened to me was that I remember when I joined the nonprofit organization as a volunteer, and a board member was willing to pay for me to lose my accent, right? And the other board member said, no, that's the biggest asset that he has. Embrace him he's a Hispanic. I mean, that's the value that he offered to the organization. And I attend meetings, and if I don't speak, they don't realize that I'm Hispanic for some reasons. But the most important thing is that when we bring our own journey, I think that we add a lot of value because we share, like when I'm able to share data about our communities, how many business owners we are, the size of those businesses, that's how we get a lot of support during the COVID by the NJEDA, that they include micro businesses as a separate portion of the money that was allocated for businesses. Those big changes make a difference for us, but it's only when we have that communication with the state and with the agencies that we can make that happen.
And I think one other I'm a community organizer at heart, right? So that's like my root. But one of the things I always think about is I love that you just brought up a story where people had any conversations about the way that you spoke, your accent, right?
Mm-hmm.
But by engaging with those board members, right, they get to know you as the person, right? Your family. And just by that, you're going to realize a bunch of shared commonalities, regardless of culture, right? And I think that's where we continue to build, right? Like we build our networks and we cross the divide of misunderstanding, right? There's less misunderstanding if we have more conversations. And I know you mentioned hard conversations too, but once people get to know us individually, I think that we're able to coordinate better, collaborate better, and really move shared policies and goals forward.
I will add to that wholeheartedly. Whenever I have a conversation with an executive that is interviewing for a Fortune 500, Fortune 250 company, I ask them, tell me about yourself. And I won't say every single one, but a good portion go into, well, I started my career at this company, and I said, no. Take it to the beginning. Where were you born? Are your parents divorced? What kind of household were you raised in? Because you hit the nail on the head, Sam. When it comes to board service, if it's from your end or my perspective on corporate boards, they really need to find ways to connect with you. And if they've gone through divorced parents or whatever it is, or from a small town, those are the connections that are really going to be meaningful. And at the end of the day, say this person is someone I want to be around the table with because I have more commonalities than I ever thought I had. But you have to be able to take it to a point where you might be vulnerable, but it's very welcome.
And I think for both, whether it's corporate boards or stateside boards, I think, or our state boards, one thing that is clear is if you are not at the table, you're on the menu. End of story, right? And it's not about kicking people out and putting new people on. It's really about extending this table, right? And I like to bring up the table analogy because exactly what you just said, it's finding those common threads, right, for the common fabric that just is like what we're trying to move forward, whether it's a corporate perspective or whether it's a state perspective. That's really the shared commonality there. And people don't want to hate each other, right? I don't think that there's this like natural affinity to dislike someone. You want to like someone, especially if you're working with them, right? Everyone, especially when you're coming onto a board, everyone feels like the new kid who doesn't know like, is this the popular table? Am I going to be accepted here? Everything. But I think if we just come into this place in this very vulnerable, shared interest kind of way of getting to know folks. Oh, Ozzy, you're muted. We need to make that unmuted.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
Wanted to make sure that didn't happen. But I think it's like this shared commonality. I think you really hit the nail on the head. And that way we get to make sure that there are enough voices, more than enough voices at the table.
And I also want to mention something like everybody wants to be in a corporate board, right? A pay board, basically. But they don't understand that they need to do the due diligence, right? And be part of, because you don't want to recommend someone with no experience for a large board, right? Because just out of the gate, you are in a disadvantage compared with other board members.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, for me, non-for-profit and government agencies allow me to access networks that I didn't have access to before. When I came here, I'm from Colombia in 2004. I don't have classmates. I don't have, like family members that can make that introduction for me. But working with government agencies and with non-for-profit allow me to connect with people that they have really good roles in different organizations. And when you connect on things that everybody loves, right? Sometimes a board member say, I just want to focus on this program or on animals, different activities. When you connect in something that you have in common, I mean, it's a new door of opportunities that open for everybody. And the last thing that I want to mention is that it's very interesting that people pay attention to your title. Yeah, I always say that I did the same work as a board member, as a vice chairman, or as a chairman, but I get more conversation if I'm introduced as a chairman than if I get introduced just as a board member, right? And it is no because I want that to happen. Is that some people only pay attention to, they think that I will do less work or I will be less impactful if I'm just a board member or a vice chairman than I'm a chairman, right? And it's very interesting because the type of conversation that I start happening after I became a chairman changed. And I start getting invited to different activities that I was not invited before.
Mm-hmm. I will say, with the work that Sam's leading in the state level, always keep in mind when, the number one question people say, how do I get on a corporate board? Well, it's a very, there's a lot of answers to that question. But one thing that we always say is get governance knowledge. If it's through not-for-profit, from state, and at least that allows you to do two things. One, understand at least what it means to be a board member and board responsibilities. And two, allows you to build those connections and networks, because a couple of data points that I'll share with you. 2/3 of board searches are still done by who you know. And the first day you step in onto that board, they're going to size you up. They're going to be assessing you, and they might say and one day, 10 years later, hey, I think you would be a great corporate board member. So that's a number one thing. The other piece is that networking really allows you to build that network to hopefully bigger and better things. So it's about building the blocks to be able to get to hopefully a larger board. And then the last thing with Luis that you mentioned regarding the title, I think on paper, I think that's very, very true. But once again, being on these state boards allow you to kind of build the brand that you want to build, title agnostic, right? So there's a lot of benefits of doing this level of work to start building those blocks to be able to hopefully, land a public board seat or a private board seat. There's not a lot of seats that turn over, right? So you still have to continue to focus on your career, focus on that governance knowledge, and then hopefully one day be able to have those doors open for you so you're able to land something that is, more meaningful when it comes to corporate board service.
I'd also, one last thing I would mention is everybody wants to be on a board, right? Or I think a lot of people want to be on a board, whether it's in government or corporate. But I think the one thing is I cannot tell you how many times people are like, I really want to do this. Here's my resume. We send them the questionnaire and they never follow up, and we ping them a couple of times, right? So I think that really it's something to mention here of I can't force you and I can't make you fill something out if you don't do it. So it's that due diligence to complete the paperwork, right? Which is, I know, like kind of the boring part, but kind of like your college education lets us all know that you know how to hand in papers on time and that you probably have some expertise in the subject matter. Handing in the paperwork lets us know that you're really fully committed to being a part of this board, as well as, you know, for doing the kind of boring work before you get into the meat of the heart of the matter. So I would say, again, due diligence just to make sure that you're good on the paperwork. And I really just enjoyed, I know that we're over time, but I really enjoyed this conversation today.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I definitely, I agree with you. And I want to stress that this is an honor to serve on any board, because you can have such a huge impact on your community and the passion, you know, and the issues that you're very passionate about. I don't want this just to be like a webinar that we have and that's it, you know, so there are people asking for your information. We have listed the website a couple times and a phone number to reach your office. But what do you think would be the best way for us? And we can also have an internal conversation on how do we compile some resumes from our members and get them to you.
So compiling resumes is really great. The other aspect, again, is going to be that 1 through 5 choices of what boards or commissions that folks are interested in, because again, I can't pick for you. You know yourself better, but I would recommend anyone can email me at samantha.parker, Parker, @nj.gov. They can also email appointments at nj.gov. So one is obviously my direct email. The other is an inbox that I usually give for webinars like this, just so that one of my colleagues directly handles it.
And I want to mention that we at the Statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, we will support the people. I mean, if they have questions and we can guide them, we have CPAs, we have lawyers that are part of our familia that are willing to provide free advice just to make people feel comfortable when they are taking those roles for the first time.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you so much again, Samantha. Thank you, Ozzy, Luis, for taking the time to inform our community of the opportunities that are out there for them to serve, you know, to build up their resumes, but most importantly, to give back to their communities. So again, if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to send them our way. You know, you can go to our website. It's www.SHCCNJ.org. That's the website of the State Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. You can always message us on our social media platforms. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and LinkedIn. And sign up for our newsletter. And thank you so much. You guys have a great afternoon. Nos vemos pronto. Y que tengan un buen día. That means have a great day.
Gracias.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you very much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
I appreciate it. Take care.